We move now to Psalm 91. O you who dwell in the shelter of the Most High and abide in the protection of Shaddai, I say of the Lord, my refuge and stronghold, my God in whom I trust, that he will save you from the fowler's trap, from the destructive plague. He will cover you with his pinions. You will find refuge under his wings. His fidelity is an encircling shield. You need not fear the terror by night, or the arrow that flies by day, the plague that stalks in the darkness, or the scourge that ravages at noon. 1,000 may fall at your left side, 10,000 at your right, but it shall not reach you. You will see it with your eyes. You will witness the punishment of the wicked. Because you took the Lord, my refuge, the Most High, as your haven, no harm will befall you, no disease touch your tent. For he will order his angels to guard you wherever you go. They will carry you in their hands, lest you hurt your foot on a stone. You will tread on cubs and vipers. You will trample lions and asps. Because he is devoted to me, I will deliver him. I will keep him safe, for he knows my name. When he calls on me, I will answer him. I will be with him in distress. I will rescue him and make him honored. I will let him live to a ripe old age and show him my salvation. What a message of hope and deliverance and support that comes through so powerfully in this psalm. As opposed to a few of the psalms that we have looked at previously, this psalm is all about God being our haven, our refuge, our strength. We find shelter under God's protecting wings. We will not fear terror by night. We will not be afraid of plagues, of the arrow that flies by the day, namely attacks against us by our enemies. Because we seek refuge in God, according to the psalmist here, we are protected from harm and from disease. So there's a great measure of comfort described in this psalm. Therefore, it is no accident that this particular psalm is the one that, according to Jewish tradition, is recited during the procession at the gravesite during a funeral. Once the hearse arrives at the cemetery and the casket is removed from the hearse and brought by the pallbearers from the hearse to the grave, this psalm is often recited either by the officiating rabbi or by family members or other leaders among the group. And it is traditional during this particular psalm, while the processional is happening and while this psalm is being read, to pause and stop 7 times on the way towards the grave. The processional, namely those who accompany the casket, as well as the casket itself, of course, are stopped 7 times before reaching the gravesite. What is the reason for this custom? Let me read for you from one of the great classic books about Jewish death practices and mourning. The book is by Maurice Lamb. It is called The Jewish Way in Death and Mourning, and let me read for you a paragraph from this classic work. There are several customs regarding the number of pauses made in order to indicate our willingness to end the service and when and for whom they should not be made. One custom establishes 7 stops. 7 pauses are customary in most communities. The Midrash cites a strange but insightful reason for halting 7 times. Midrash, namely a work of commentaries on biblical sections and biblical verses. The Midrash was composed many centuries after the canonization of the Holy Scriptures. Death confronts men with the need to reassess their own existence and ponder the big questions of life. What is the use of all our strivings? Does life have a deeper meaning? Does man, after all, come to naught? These are the great issues that disturb Ecclesiastes as he seeks to understand the true meaning of life. Vanity of vanities, Ecclesiastes said. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity, in chapter 1, verse 2. Vanity, in this context, signifies the vapor, hevel, the vapor that appears when one exhales on a cold day. It has no substance, and it disappears into thin air. That is what life is compared to by Ecclesiastes. Is life only vapor? The sages noted that vanity in the oft-quoted verse is said 3 times in the singular and twice in the plural, which adds up to 7 times. In other words, vanity is mentioned, the word in that verse 3 times, and the word vanities twice. If you count each instance of vanities, the plural, as the equivalent of 2, you would wind up with 2 vanities, that's 2 plus 2 equals 4, and an additional 3 repetitions of the word vanity, adding up to a total of 7. Each of these vanities is symbolized by a pause as one carries the casket to the grave. With each stop, the fact of ultimate death teaches us to avoid the life of vanity, to be creative and kind, to repent of evil, to walk in the path of goodness. Until now, I have quoted from Maurice Lamb's book, The Jewish Way in Death and Mourning. And so, when we pause 7 times on the way to the gravesite, we reflect on the vanity of life and how transient and fleeting life can be, as a reminder to make every day count, as we mentioned in the last psalm, and to make life as meaningful as we possibly can. Interestingly, the verse, according to tradition, during which we pause 7 times while we read this psalm on the way to the gravesite, is verse 11. Ki melachav yitzavelach lishmorcha bechol derachecha. For he will order his angels to guard you wherever you go. And when we're reciting that, we pause 7 times. We hesitate to bury our loved ones, even though Jewish law teaches and instructs us to bury as quickly as possible after someone dies. Once we are actually at the gravesite, we show hesitation. We stop 7 times. We reflect on the vanity of life. We understand that because a loved one has died, we feel particularly vulnerable. Not only are we grieving their loss, but we don't know how long we will be able to continue to live on this earth. We don't know how many days God has in store for us left. And so we feel vulnerable. And so we stop 7 times to reflect on the vanity of life. And we stop on the verse, for he will order his angels to guard us wherever we go, to remind us that God's protecting angels as an image of God's care and compassionate for us, an image of God's sheltering care of us, that his order, his instruction to his angels to protect us and guard us as we stop each time, as we hesitate to bury our loved one because we don't want to see them go. By the same token, we don't want to see our lives end as well. We want to live as long as we possibly can, as meaningfully as we possibly can, while we think about God ordering and instructing God's angels to protect us and to care for us. These are extremely comforting images during a time of sadness and grief, as a reminder that whatever we are going through in our lives, whatever hardships we are enduring, and whenever we feel that life is particularly filled with vanity and meaninglessness, that in itself is a sign and signal to find the most meaning in our lives, to live creatively and compassionately, to care for ourselves, to care for one another, and to serve God. Thank you.